Hi, my name is Sophia Fouche, and I'm a clinical psychologist at Pathways Employee Assistance Program, and today I'm going to be talking about divorce, adjustment, and recovery. Divorce has a profound impact on couples, whether they were married 1 year or 50 years. And, when marriage ends, people typically feel a significant sense of loss, and this is the loss of the person, with whom you shared many aspects of your life, emotional, physical, financial. And also duvorcing couples tend to face major changes in family structure, finances, and living arrangements. So during this presentation, I want to talk about specific stressors or losses that may occur during the divorce process and hopefully help you understand some ways to cope with the emotional impact of divorce. So as I stated previously, coping with divorce is like coping with a loss. Divorce creates an acute sense of loss, and the person who you shared your daily routine with is now absent in your life. And if you have children, you've lost the person who you shared your day-to-day responsibilities and challenges of parenting with. So, each person deals with this loss uniquely. A lot of times people expect that, dealing with the feelings of loss specifically from a divorce is something they can just get over or work through rather quickly. However, the reality of dealing with a significant loss can be a chaotic process that include both good days and bad days. And feelings can come in waves. Sometimes these waves can be expected, sometimes they're unexpected. For example, a song on the radio or something else you might associate with your marriage may evoke some strong feelings. Other times, the feelings that you experience may seem to come out of nowhere. So, having these responses to loss isn't really evidence of the fact that, you've lost your ability to cope with it, but rather this is a very common response to loss. And I think that's important to know so that if you do experience this, you don't think that it's something abnormal or unusual. And the process of grief is a natural reaction to loss. Most people experience the grieving process both during and after a divorce. And William Worden described this grieving process as consisting of 4 tasks. And his framework of grief really offers a way to identify aspects that are involved in grieving. But I think it's important to also keep in mind that these tasks are not separate aspects of grieving. You may work through them in different ways and also process some aspects again and again in different ways and in different order. But the 4 tasks of grieving involve, first, accepting the reality of the loss. So from the moment that you know or realize that your marriage is over, you may accept it on a mental level. However, it might take a longer time to really accept it emotionally. And so even while you're adjusting to a new life without your marriage, you may feel surges of certain emotions such as disbelief, anxiety, sadness, and you might really feel torn between, on one hand, wanting to accept the reality, but sometimes also feeling like you're unable to do so. And so acceptance is a process, and it's not something that just comes immediately. It's something that you really have to work through in order to kind of get to a place to where you are fully accepting. The next task of grieving is experiencing the pain of the loss. Typically, the first reaction to any significant loss, including a divorce, is denial and shock. And sometimes people may even feel emotionally numb. And this response to loss is really a coping strategy that your body and mind experiences to give you time to absorb, what's happened. But once the reality of the situation sets in, a lot of times people experience a significant amount of pain associated with the loss. And the length of time that an individual experiences this pain really varies depending on the person and the situation. So someone who's divorced because their spouse was unfaithful might need a different amount of time to deal with the loss than someone who maybe watched their marriage disintegrate over several years. So it can take several months to several years to establish a new sense of normalcy. And if there were serious problems in your relationship, you might think that coping with your divorce will somehow be easier or less painful, especially if you had previously wished that the relationship was over. But even if you had a really difficult relationship, there were probably some strong connections that kept you in the relationship. And so during and after the divorce, you might feel a sense of loss of those connections. You may feel feelings such as anger, guilt, or sadness that the relationship didn't pan out or flourish the way that you had hoped. And you also may be suddenly more aware of the positive qualities in your former spouse now that you don't have to deal with the negative aspects of the relationship. And you might be surprised at the intensity of your feelings of loss. So it's really important to know that these confusing feelings may make coping with the divorce a little bit more complicated than you may have originally thought. The next task of grieving is adjusting to your new life. Each day you might be confronted in various ways about the reality of your new life, and the process of adjusting may go on for a long time. For example, holidays or other traditions or daily rituals may be constant reminders of that may require adjustment. Okay. And the next task of grieving is finding ways to move on. At first, you might struggle to adjust to your divorce, but as time goes on, your life will continue to evolve just as you do. And if you continue to have a relationship with your former spouse, your relationship with your spouse will also grow and evolve as well. And so, I think it's important to understand that with change comes growth, and coping with divorce is obviously, an experience that almost no one wants, but the difficult work of really sorting through those intense emotions or experiences that come up may cause you to learn new things about yourself or find new strengths, which can really result in some emotional growth and maturity. So as you cope with your divorce, you may experience a variety of symptoms. And while everyone experiences symptoms unique to their situation, understanding which responses are common and normal among people experiencing significant loss might help you better cope with these responses if you experience them. So the first are physical responses. Following a divorce, you may experience physical reactions such as shortness of breath, headaches, nausea, loss of appetite, insomnia, and fatigue. And another thing that's important to point out is that these intense emotions may also place the immune system under more stress. So you may have an increased tendency to get sick as your body is more vulnerable now because a lot of your energy is being used and focused on dealing with the loss and changes in your life. And so even though it might be the last thing on your mind, taking care of your body is really essential to keeping you physically strong enough to deal with the loss of your marriage and everything you're experiencing. Cognitive and emotional responses to loss common emotional responses to loss include sadness, anger, anxiety, guilt, relief, hopelessness, and helplessness. And so, given that, these experiences come up and can be difficult to deal with, I just want to offer some tips on how to work through a loss and things that you can do to help yourself during these experiences. The first step is to give yourself permission to grieve. You really need time to deal with your loss, and it's common to feel a wide range of emotions, both during and after a divorce. And these feelings can be very, very intense at times. And so allowing yourself to experience your feelings is really important, but it's also important to try not to let yourself become overwhelmed by them. And we'll talk in a minute about ways that you can do this, coping strategies to keep you from becoming overwhelmed. But feelings that are pushed aside or suppressed and not really tended to don't necessarily go away. They generally remain in our body, in our mind, and they wait until they're given the attention in some way that they deserve. And sometimes when they're not given the attention, these feelings can manifest in ways that are both detrimental to our physical and mental health. So, you might be more prone to physical ailments or have some common physical symptoms that may be difficult to cope with. Also, you might be more prone to developing symptoms of depression, anxiety, increased irritability, and anger. So it's really important to, even though it might be difficult to, but it's very important to face these emotions when they come up for you. But if you feel as though these emotions are more persistent, so if you're feeling persistently down or persistently nervous or fearful, and it starts to become unmanageable or makes it difficult for you to function in your day-to-day life, it might be a good idea to seek professional help to deal with those emotions. Next is to find outlets that feel right for you. It's important to really have outlets to your emotions where you aren't judged, criticized, or told what to do. And so, previously we had talked about the importance of experiencing your feelings, but also trying not to allow yourself to feel overwhelmed by them. Well, finding outlets that feel right for you can be a way to help you process your emotions and keep you from becoming overwhelmed. And so it may take some experimentation to find out which ways are helpful and effective for you to express your feelings. You may want to try writing in a journal, exercising, taking walks, meditating, or pursuing some type of pleasurable activity. Sometimes artistic tasks can be very therapeutic, such as painting or pottery. Next is to seek support. Most people find that talking about their feelings really helps them deal with and accept their loss. So reaching out to a trusted friend or family member can go a long way. Excuse me. Strengthening your existing friendships and expanding your circle of friends is always a good idea during this transition in your life. If you're sometimes divorce can impact social networks, and so while you're going through a divorce, you may want to try to meet new people. If by way of the divorce, you may have lost some of your contacts or some of your friendships. Ways to meet new people are through attending a lecture, joining a class or club, getting involved in your community or volunteering. Another way to seek support is by joining a support group. Support groups can really offer an opportunity to talk with people in different stages or adjustment to their divorce, and also give you an opportunity to vent emotions and seek help and advice. And one common resource for finding support groups in your area is a website called divorcecare.org. So if this is something you're interested in, I would encourage you to look into this website and type in your city and or zip code and find some support groups that are close to your area. The next step is getting professional help. So depending on your existing support system and your own personal style, and also how well you're coping with your divorce, you may want to seek some help from a mental health professional. And finally, another beneficial step in working through a loss can be focusing on moving forward. Now, although this may be very difficult to do in the beginning, as your mind might be primarily focused on the divorce and your relationship with your ex, trying to look forward to the future rather than backwards after your divorce can be very beneficial. Over time, the intensity of your painful feelings will lessen, and your feelings of loss may not necessarily go away, but they become easier to manage and won't always demand as much of your energy. So most people find that as the intensity of their grief lessens, they're able to really focus more of their energy towards moving forward with their new life. Okay. Another critical aspect to dealing with a loss and working through a loss in a healthy and effective manner is self-care. And self-care is something that that sometimes isn't given the attention that it deserves. But when you're dealing with a major loss such as divorce, you'll likely notice that your body seems to need more attention. You may feel more tired. And so I think it's really important to try and respect what your body needs and do your best to try to keep yourself healthy so you'll have the strength that you need. So the first element of self-care is making sure that you eat well. In the early months after a divorce, or at times when your feelings are really intense, it's really common to lose your appetite. And so physically as well as emotionally, it's important that you maintain good nutrition. And so trying to eat smaller amounts of nutritious food throughout the day rather than 3 large meals might be more beneficial. If you experience a significant change in your weight or are still losing or gaining weight after a couple of months, it's a good idea to talk to your doctor. And although appetite loss is one of the most common reactions to loss, sometimes people experience an increase in the amount that they eat. And this is often a form of self-soothing, as sometimes people turn to food for comfort. And so while this, coping strategy of eating for comfort might temporarily take your mind off of your loss, in the long term, it's not a coping strategy that's healthy or helpful. Next is exercise regularly. Exercise is beneficial not just for your physical well-being, but also for your mental well-being. When you exercise, your body releases endorphins, which are natural mood elevators. And so exercise can help with your mood, can help reduce stress, and also keep you physically strong during a period when your immune system might be compromised due to the stress of the divorce. And so if you weren't exercising regularly before the divorce, I would encourage you to start with an activity that you enjoy that's not overly strenuous. And of course, you should get the approval of your doctor first. Next is to focus on your breathing. When we experience a heightened sense of stress or anxiety, either brought on by a loss or any sort of stressful situation, this usually results in changes in our breathing. Specifically, we'll experience more shallow and rapid breathing. So if you make a conscious effort to slow down your breathing, take a few deep breaths, pause briefly between exhaling and inhaling, and relax your shoulders, you can lower your anxiety level. And this is something that can be very helpful, particularly when you're dealing with an acutely stressful situation. Next is to avoid drugs and alcohol. Although these substances may seem like an easy relief for your pain and grief, the reality is that alcohol is actually a depressant that can increase your saddened mood, and drugs can numb feelings that can prolong the healing process and also lead to more problems such as abuse. So just best to avoid these substances. And finally, a very important component is to get plenty of sleep. After a divorce, you might experience disruptions in your sleep pattern. Both insomnia and fatigue are common after suffering a loss. And so if you notice yourself having difficulty with sleep, you definitely want to talk to your doctor or a mental health professional about this, because sleep can have a trickle-down effect and lower our frustration tolerance, our ability to manage stress, and might even lead to symptoms of anxiety and depression. And so making sure that any sleep issues are attended to is really important. So when going through a divorce, another component that can increase stress are the changes that come along with this adjustment period. And so the first change is in identity. When you're going through a divorce or after a divorce, you're now a single person and no longer have the role of spouse. And so you may need to rethink your identity as an individual, parent, family member, and friend. And this might require you to re-examine and redefine who you are and who you want to be. You may also experience change in finances, which are one of the greatest sources of stress in a divorce. Most people go from one two-income household to two one-income households, and dividing up financial obligations and assets can create significant tension between former spouses. If you have children, there can be a change in family structure, and divorce doesn't necessarily mean the end of your relationship with the spouse, but the structure of your family must change. And the process of redefining the family takes time and effort, and a lot of times involves trial and error. You may also experience change in relationships with family and friends of your former spouse, and in some cases, these relationships may end. And there may be changes in other relationships as well. People may take sides in your divorce, or you may change some of your own relationships by spending more time with single or divorced people and less time with couples. Change in social life is also common. You may find that you no longer wish to attend certain social events, especially those geared towards couples. And finally, every couple has their own unique way of defining and dividing up responsibilities in the marriage. And when you go through a divorce, a lot of times these responsibilities must be handled independently. And so assuming these tasks that were formerly shared by two people can be overwhelming. So some steps in coping with change, or some tips that can help you successfully cope with change associated with divorce are, one, recognizing that change causes stress. So change, whether it's good or bad, leads to an increased level of stress. And as we talked about before, taking steps to manage your stress can be very helpful, such as getting plenty of sleep, exercise, eating well, and finding outlets. Maintaining as much stability as you can is also a really important coping strategy for change. When you're going through a divorce, you may have varying intensities of emotion that might impair your judgment, and you might make decisions that you may later regret if you made them during times of emotional upheaval. So you may need some time to reestablish your sense of self and determine who you are and what you need. And maintaining a stability can provide a sense of security and safety, which can be really beneficial to healing. So if you must make major decisions, try to wait until you're able to think clearly and rationally. And it can also help to talk to a trusted loved one or seek the help of a professional who can provide objective advice. Next is set realistic expectations. Know your limits and try to aim for what's realistically attainable. Something that sometimes people have trouble with is saying no, and this can be a really important thing to do, especially when you're dealing with increased demands and stress. And so overextending yourself may lead to exhaustion and resentment. So you definitely want to know your limitations and set them appropriately. The next step is to prioritize. There may be a number of things that you have to do after your divorce, but obviously you want to try and break these up in manageable ways and address these things in order of importance. And so opening a new checking account, finding a new place to live, moving, are all things that people face when they're going through a divorce. But focusing on the most essential tasks and working through them and accepting that maybe the less important tasks may not get done or may not get done immediately is an important thing to know. Next is to get help. Establish and rely on a support system of family and friends to help give you assistance when, in any way that they can. Studies have shown that people who have more sources of support are less likely to experience the detrimental effects of stress. Avoid isolation. Even though it might feel tempting to be alone or to have a lot of alone time during this time, isolating yourself from others can really lead to loneliness and depression. So it's really important to reach out to others for support. And maintaining a positive attitude, a lot of times is easier said than done, especially in the beginning of the divorce process. But although this is a difficult time, focusing your thoughts on positive things such as your strengths, or surrounding yourself with people who support you and value you can really go a long way. And so, trying to view this process as an opportunity for change and growth and exploration of new possibilities can also be a way of shifting your attention towards a more positive aspect. And finally, exploring your interests. Divorce provides you with an opportunity to really explore new interests and revisit old ones. So giving yourself an opportunity to think about activities or causes or issues that excite you and finding ways to get involved can help you cope with the change and transition. Okay. Next, I just want to talk about some common signs of stress. Dealing with loss and change from a divorce can be extremely stressful, and it helps to be aware of your sources of stress and your style of coping. And so while everyone experiences stress in their own unique way, there are some common symptoms. The first is difficulty concentrating, also difficulty falling asleep or frequent awakenings, frequent headaches, loss or increase in appetite, fatigue, feeling faint or dizzy, nausea, shortness of breath or tightness in chest. And so these are just a few of the more common symptoms, but it would also be beneficial to just take a minute to think back to a time when you were particularly stressed and think about what stress signals you recall feeling. And this, simple exercise and self-reflection can really give you some insight into your way of uniquely controlling stress or some of the indicators that you're feeling a heightened level of stress. And so some ways to manage stress include assessing your expectations, and we've kind of talked about this before, just kind of considering whether your expectations are realistic and scaling them down to attainable levels if necessary, prioritizing, not overcommitting yourself and learning to say no, striving to be a good person, but not a perfect person, because there are no perfect people, but sometimes we set these unrealistic expectations for ourselves that inadvertently set us up for feelings of failure or negative emotions. And so, just having expectations that are within reason. Simplifying tasks, purchasing food that's easy to prepare, combining errands into one trip, and just kind of thinking through how you can simplify things in your life. Making time to relax and enjoy a favorite activity. And finally, taking care of yourself, which we've already talked about with regard to self-care. Finally, another stressor that sometimes people can face when going through a divorce is pressure to date. So friends in well-meaning efforts might encourage you to date or pressure you to stay busy in ways before you're actually ready. And sometimes these efforts can leave people feeling irritated, isolated, or wondering why they aren't adjusting as quickly as others around them think that they should be. So even though your friends may want to help, you may need to explain to them that you need time and as much time as it takes for you to really learn who you are or what you need before you start dating someone else. On the other hand, you may meet someone soon after your divorce who, offers you comfort and brings you a sense of happiness. And you might again feel pressure from well-intentioned friends who might suggest that you're moving too quickly. But the bottom line is that there is no set timetable, and only you know what's right for you in terms of beginning new relationships. So trust your instincts and do whatever makes you feel happy. So in conclusion, I just want to point out some key points. When a marriage ends, most people feel, a sense of loss, and allowing yourself time to work through this loss is important. And you might feel a wide range of emotions that can be very intense, and it'll take time to process these feelings. But if you don't give these feelings the time and attention that they deserve, they don't go away. They usually manifest in ways that are emotionally and mentally unhealthy for us. And divorcing couples face significant changes in their lives, changes in family structure, finances, living arrangements, household responsibility, and these changes cause stress. So knowing how you respond both physically and emotionally to stress can really help you develop coping methods that are uniquely effective for you. Self-care is also an important component of stress management, and it may take a deliberate effort to implement self-care in your life, especially when you are facing increased demands and responsibilities, but taking this time to, or setting aside time to do things that allow you to take care of yourself both emotionally and physically is worth the effort. And although, your friends may be well-intentioned and may have opinions about how soon or you should start dating or how long you should wait, only you know what's right for you. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you.